I'm Hala Mahideen in Doha with the top stories on Al Jazeera. Buildings in Gaza housing media outlets, including Al Jazeera Media Network and the Associated Press, have been evacuated following a warning from the Israeli military. Journalists had to leave their offices after being told the building will be targeted in 1 hour. This is the building that has been threatened. Well, Israel's ambulance service says one person has died and one person has been badly wounded in Tel Aviv after 30 rockets were fired from Gaza. One of them fell in the middle of a street. Nearby buildings were damaged by the shrapnel. One of the rockets hit Ben Gurion International Airport. Protests are underway in the Palestinian territory as Israel continues to bombard Gaza from the air and the ground. Crowds have gathered in Al-Bireh in the occupied West Bank, where anger over past and present injustices has been building. Mira Ibrahim has more from Al-Bireh in the occupied West Bank.
Many Palestinians have been telling us over the past days that they are protesting because they believe that the Nakba is still ongoing. It's not just an incident that happened 73 years ago, but that all of what happened, or most of what happened in 1948, is still ongoing now when it comes to Palestinians' lives under occupation. The land grabs, the expansion of illegal Israeli settlements, the settler attacks that are intensifying against Palestinians, the house evictions, so you name it. So for many Palestinians, this day not just remind them of what happened 73 years ago, but it reminds them that they are still living under these circumstances. This is why many protesters are taking to the streets of different cities in the occupied West Bank. We're seeing less numbers than we've seen on Friday protests, but the day is still young and we might be seeing more and more protests across different cities in the West Bank. 3 funerals have been held already this morning for Palestinians who were shot dead by the Israeli army's fire in confrontations on Friday. And the number of Palestinians who were killed in Friday was 11. And one of those Palestinians, the Israeli army, said that he tried to carry out an attack against the Israeli army near an illegal Israeli settlement, and they didn't hand his body over to his family for burial. This is not something new. This is a policy that Israel implements by withholding the bodies of Palestinians it believes were involved in attacks against its soldiers or settlers. And it keeps those bodies to kind of punish the families and so they can't bury their loved ones. So this is the situation that many Palestinians would tell you is frustrating. They're also frustrated at the Palestinian Authority. They say that it hasn't been giving a strong reaction when it comes to helping them fight the Israeli occupation. And many here have been telling us that if the Palestinian Authority is not a part of the solution, then it is part of the problem.
Well, let's get more now from Al Jazeera. Safwat Al-Kahlout, he joins us live from Gaza. Safwat, you normally work in the building that we're showing our viewers on this live shot from Gaza. Just give us a sense now of where you are and what has happened in the previous hours or so.
Well, let's start with the phone call that one of the residents living in Al Jala building, where Al Jazeera is staying or taking the roof of this building for the coverage. One of the residents received a phone call. He said that it was from the Israeli army, warning him to leave and to tell others to leave the building Al Jala, because the Israelis, they want to bombard it. So the gentleman, he started either calling or contacting others who live or work in the building to evacuate. He said that the Israelis told him, you have 1 hour to leave and inform others to leave the building. Immediately, all of Al Jazeera Arabic and Al Jazeera English, the teams, they started to collect as much as they could from the personnel and the equipment of the office, especially the cameras and other important things that used for immediate coverage. So all of us and my colleagues, they rushed out the building, and we informed, of course, our other colleagues not to come, those who were supposed to come to the office. So now we are all staying outside the building. Lots of international media now are surrounding this building, Al Jala. All the cameras, all the many SNGs outside, just to provide clean feed, as they said, for the destruction of the building in case the Israelis apply the threat or the warning. So far, we can say this building is 11-floor building. Most of it, or half of it, is residential, and the other half is private sector offices, including lawyers and private companies and other private sector facilities. The Al Jazeera and the Associated Press, we both rent the top of this building. We are dividing the roof of this building, and Al Jazeera and the AP could be seen from the top, from everywhere, with cameras, with coverage, as under the sun, as we say. Now we are covering from the street until we manage or try to find alternative or find a plan B for our coverage.
Absolutely. It's interesting. You mentioned there, Safwat, that there are professional companies in one half of this 11-story tower block, not least Al Jazeera and the Associated Press. But half of that building is residential. Will those residents in the tower also have been given a warning to evacuate, or is there a risk that people could still be in that building?
Look, there are two ways of Israeli warning. Either they send a small rocket, as we call it, looking rocket, by the Israeli drones. They hit the top of the building of the aimed building. Then the people understand that this is a warning and they have to leave because the Israelis are going to bomb it. And the second way is that they call one person of the whole building, could be the guard, could be anyone living or working in this building. So this one that has been informed to tell the others, he is in charge of informing the rest of the people or residents who live or work in this building. This is the only two ways that the Israelis are normally informed or warn the Palestinians to evacuate their buildings and to leave the residential facilities or offices.
You mentioned, Safwat, about how difficult it is, certainly for a media organisation. There's a lot of equipment we need to tell stories, to get the story out to the world. But for others who are in there, if you're living in that apartment, that's your entire life in that apartment. Just give us a sense of how difficult it is for people living in the Gaza Strip when they are given a 1-hour warning. What do people pack up? What's important to residents when they're told your building will be destroyed in 1 hour? How do they prioritise what to pack up and what to leave behind?
That's a complicated question because the answer is also complicated. Because, this reminds us or recalls the experience of Hanaldi building and another two high residential buildings that include from 10 to 14 residential floors. So you suddenly receive a warning that you have few minutes to leave. It's not something that in Gaza they have apartment B or plan B or building B that they can immediately just switch or turn on their cars and move. Many people, they start, first of all, safety first, they evacuate. They try to get the important documents like passport, etc., or money if they have, and then they wait outside to see if this warning is true, or maybe or the Israelis are going to change their minds, etc., etc. Once the building is destroyed, then the people who live there or work there realize that this is the end of their house or of their residential facility. So in Gaza, the social structure is very solid, and and concrete. People, they normally, especially during escalation, they help each other. No one closed his door for someone or in front of someone who lost his house. So lots of people, they announce or they tell or they start maybe visiting the destroyed places. They ask others to hospitalize them in their homes until they find solutions. Some others, they go to their relatives, brothers, etc. If some others, they have some money, of course, they go and or try to rent apartment or find immediate solution for the family, especially if they have kids. Mm-hmm. But there is nothing that we can say that everybody has plan B because he lives in Gaza and he's expecting that his house could be anytime destroyed, or he will receive a warning from the Israelis that this is the Israeli army, leave, we are going to bomb. This is something not practical for the Palestinians to find alternative solutions. Just let me recall the experience of Al Jazeera also in the war 2014, when the Israelis also, they fired a warning, a live fire on our office. It was in the morning, I still remember that day. In the middle of the coverage, in the middle of preparing for the daily coverage, suddenly from the borderline, the Israelis fired live fire, one bullet. I still remember that on directly into or inside our office. So we rushed. We understood that was a message. We have not received at that time any warning from anyone to leave, but that was a message to leave, or we thought about is that the office, this is a warning and we have to leave. That was the first experience with the Israeli army warnings for Al Jazeera. And today is the second time now we are all leaving. It is still early to look for and to prepare ourselves for the heavy coverage that we have been doing day and night. Of course, we have plan B, but still early to fix everything because we had to leave everything behind us in the office, especially the SNG and the live equipment coverage.
Yes, it's certainly not our first. Oh, we're going to stay with you, Safwat. It looks like, yes, it looks like there has been a strike targeting the building. Targeting the Al Jalal building. For viewers just joining us, we're bringing you a live shot from Gaza. Safwat Al-Kahlout still on the phone. I hope you're safe, Safwat. The Al Jazeera team has managed to evacuate from that building. They were given 1 hour's notice that the Israeli military were intending to attack this 11-storey building. Half of that building is residential offices. The other half of that building is private enterprises, lawyers and so on. Al Jazeera's offices in Gaza are housed in that building, which has now been struck by a missile, we assume by the Israeli military. The Associated Press offices are also in that building. Bringing you this live shot here now. Safwat, are you still on the phone? Can you still hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm here.
OK, I'm glad to hear that you're safe and well. What can you see from your position? How far away are you from that building that has now just been bombed?
Well, let's say that lots of people have been gathering in this area. Our building is located in the heart of Gaza City, and it's easy to reach the office from all the directions. Next to our office, there were lots of buildings and facilities that have been destroyed and hit. People, I myself have been receiving lots of phone calls and lots of either WhatsApp or Facebook, from friends, colleagues, even relatives abroad, asking me what happened, is that true, and checking with me.
Well, just to check, Safwat, just to check.
Here. Lots of people are gathering near our office. Lots of media, journalists, cameramen, SNGs. Civil defense cars or vehicles are also standby.
Yes, Safwat, sorry, just to jump in, Safwat.
So lots of people and media colleagues are standby and waiting there to see if the Israelis are going to apply and destroy it or not.
OK, Safwat, can you just, do we know at this stage whether that was a warning shot that we've just been showing our viewers, or if that is the main strike? Because the buildings that these live pictures that we're focusing on now, we can still see some aerials and equipment.
The warning shot was in 2014. I was talking about the experience.
No, we're talking about right now.
But this time, the warning is not for Al Jazeera itself directly. We were not the one who received the warning from the Israelis. It was one of the residents living in the building who received the warning, and in his turn he informed, and he was in charge of informing the others who live in this building.
Okay, just to jump in on top there. Now we have seen it. We believe that is now the strike. That was now the strike on the Al Jallah building. As you can see from the live pictures we're showing you now, that appears to be a direct hit in the side of the building. Lots of smoke billowing out of there. As we were hearing from our colleague Safwat Al-Kahlout, when the building was targeted in 2014, there was no warning shots. There were a couple of bullets shot through the glass, giving people notice they needed to get out. On this occasion, a resident in the tower, someone in the tower's owner, was given notification that the Israeli military were intending to strike. Then all residents of that tower were given 1 hour to get out. We saw a smaller explosion on those pictures, a much bigger explosion there. Lots of smoke and dust arising outside of that building. Not sure if it will stay standing or not. We're going to keep our eyes closely trained on this. But certainly, for more context, that building is where Al Jazeera's offices are. There we are, another strike on that tower. And the tower has come down. That is the Al Jallah Tower. That tower is where Al Jazeera's offices were housed. The Associated Press offices were also housed in that building. Whenever you see journalists doing live updates from Gaza, they're usually standing on the roof of that building, which has now been flattened in an airstrike by the Israeli military. So that is a landmark, an institution that has now been razed to the ground in Gaza. Important to remember as well that in this building, in addition to the media offices of Al Jazeera and the Associated Press, there are professional offices in that building, and half of that 11-storey tower block is also residential properties where families have been living. Their homes have now been destroyed. Let's head back now to Safwat Al-Kahlout. Safwat, are you still on the phone? Can you still hear us?
Yeah, I'm just watching, that which was Al Jazeera building or Al Jallah building. Lots of dust, lots of destruction.
How does that make you feel, Safwat? This was your place of work. How does this make you feel, watching that building come crashing down?
I've been working in this building for 11 years now. And, I have been covering, let's say, lots of events from this building. We have good memories with our colleagues. We have lived lots of events, personal, professional experiences with our colleagues. Now everything in 2 seconds just vanished. So
It's a very difficult day. I'm also going to let our viewers know as well, as that building came crashing down, there was real distress in this newsroom here in Doha as we watched that building come down.
Now, you know, one can understand the feeling of the people whose homes have been destroyed by such kind of air forces or air attacks. So it's really difficult to wake up one day and then you realize that your office is not there with all the career, the experience, the memories that you had with in the last 10 or 11 years.
Yes, certainly. The stories that have been told from this building, it's very difficult to express what a loss this is, but certainly not just for Al Jazeera, for the Associated Press and for others who are using this building and this facility to get the stories of Gaza, to get the stories of this region out to a wider audiences. It's really quite staggering to see that. An hour's warning was given to get people out. We're showing our viewers now the moment that's, I think that was the third bomb strike that managed to bring down the Al Jalaa Tower. But it's a very different skyline in Gaza, a very different skyline from here on in. And it's going to be a very different experience as well, because it makes certainly the job of telling these stories much harder when you destroy the offices of journalists who are trying to get people's voice and people's experience out to the outside world. So Safwat Al-Kahlout, we think we may have lost our phone link with that. That's Al Jazeera's Safwat Al-Kahlout, who has been working from that tower. Safwat, are you still with us? Can you hear us?
I am.
Are you with other colleagues, other people who've been evacuated from the building? We understand that you're all trying to congregate safely somewhere away from the building, which has now been destroyed. How are other people reacting to this?
Let me just, before that, maybe it's something really very impressive. All of my colleagues are, despite the sadness and all what we just mentioned before, they didn't stop a second. They were looking for alternative and, just to keep Al Jazeera on top of the news. My colleague in Al Jazeera Arabic, and of course our cameraman and also the assistants of the SNG, they have from the first second they asked me, let's work and try to apply Plan B. So apart from their personal safety that immediately they evacuated, they started to think of how to keep Al Jazeera on, how to keep our coverage on, again on top of the news. So I really have no words to express my appreciation.
Yes,
and all the good manners for these teams in Gaza. You know, I have been working before Al Jazeera with many teams, with many media groups, but really my colleagues here are the best that I've ever worked with. They don't think about their personal life than about the professional one and the coverage of Al Jazeera. They want to keep it on. So despite his personal problems at home and his suffering with his son, I'm sorry to say that online, but this is one of the stories that we can tell about. But he immediately asked me, let's find or let's apply Plan B. I from the beginning, I told him, let's think about our personal safety, and then we will set Plan B. Don't worry, there is always a Plan B. So my colleagues, are really amazing colleagues. We are family of Al Jazeera in Gaza. All together, EGA and EGE, Al Jazeera Network, all of them, they are one hand, one spirit, one practical team.
They certainly are. Safwat Al-Kahlout joining us there live from Gaza. It's a difficult job you do at the best of times, Safwat. It's exceptionally difficult now that your office, your place of work has now been bombed in front of us live on television. We are grateful to everything you and the rest of our colleagues are doing to keep telling those stories. This channel will not be silenced. Al Jazeera will not be silenced. We can guarantee you that right now. Safwat Al-Kahlout joining us live from Gaza. Thank you very much indeed and stay safe. Let's turn now to our colleague Harry Fawcett. He's in West Jerusalem. Harry, you've been covering the violence within Israel. We're seeing these devastating strikes. We're also seeing the Al Jazeera offices being bombed live on television. What reaction do you have, first of all?
Well, yeah, just to firstly say, I'm in occupied East Jerusalem here in Sheikh, Jarrah, where a lot of what we're seeing now from Gaza really began, the tensions in Jerusalem. I'm not able to see the images from here, but thanks to your and Safwat's exceptional work, I'm pretty clear what has just happened. And it is one of those rare instances where, as dispassionate and as out of the story you try and keep yourself, this is a very personal moment for all of us, as it is a major story in this developing situation. I'm just thinking back to the first time I went in there and met Safwat, and he offered me a cup of tea and said, "Sugar?" I said, "No," and he happily said, "Okay, just a little bit," and put 2 massive spoonfuls of sugar in a very delicious cup of tea. And that was the start of our relationship. That was the start of my time working in Gaza. And the idea that place is now no more is really quite extraordinary to contemplate. The live position with those amazing dusk views out over Gaza, the kitchen where we used to sit around, have meals, watch the big screen, the room where people used to sleep because it's often a 24/7 business, especially in Gaza, the area where people used to pray. It's all just gone, and hearing Safwat describe it quite so well, and his emotions must be running high, it really is a testament to his professionalism and that of the rest of the team in Gaza.
It certainly is. Harry, you're in Sheikh Jarrah, in occupied East Jerusalem. Thank you for the clarification there. This is, of course, where a lot of the recent escalation comes back to. Certainly, you could people will argue for years and millennia over when this violence actually started. But certainly in Sheikh Jarrah, this could be where this most recent round of escalation between the Israelis and the Palestinians has its origins. What's happening right now where you are?
Right now, it is kind of a strange, one of those strange moments when what you're looking at is in entire contrast to what you're listening to. I'm looking at a group of young activists, student age, mainly female, with a few lads as well. They are painting a message on the whitewashed wall of one of the properties that is at risk of having its Palestinian owners displaced. And so they are here in the sunshine, in dappled sunshine, in this place where there has been itself, obviously, a lot of violence. As recently as this morning, there were some pretty severe clashes here. And yesterday, Friday, there was a shooting with a face-off between Jewish settlers, 2 of whom at least were armed, and a group of Palestinians who were firing rockets firework rockets into their courtyard and stones and the like. So this remains a tense place. It remains, as you say, one of the main fueling factors of this entire escalation that's been going on since the beginning of Ramadan. But right now, it is peaceful. People are looking pretty cheerful, and they're painting these messages on this whitewashed wall.
Which is interesting. You see this contrast, really, because this is a tale of two worlds, in a sense, if you like. On one hand, you have Palestinians undergoing daily bombing. We've just seen the Al Jazeera offices being bombed live on television. On the other hand, another section of the population in this very small country gets to live in peace and security. Now, that peace and security in Tel Aviv was ruptured not more than an hour ago. There has been developments there. Hamas have fired rockets into Tel Aviv. Do we know more about this rocket attack? Because from following this recent conflict, we understand there will be a retaliation to the fact that rockets have made it into Tel Aviv and killed at least one person.
Well, yes, this is another substantial barrage from Hamas. It is said that it can sustain attacks on Tel Aviv for the next 6 months, should it wish to. Certainly the reporting that was there this morning that the Israeli military had dealt a very major blow to Hamas's ability to fire rockets. Obviously, the fighting factions inside Gaza are trying to answer that, and it does seem that, in some extent, they have done so with the very sad news of another death inside Tel Aviv. I mean, obviously, people on the Israeli side of this conflict would disagree with the idea that they are currently living in security, especially in the areas around Gaza. There is a great deal of insecurity, and they feel often that they've been abandoned to that, and that it only becomes a major issue when major conurbations in the middle of the country, such as Tel Aviv and the suburbs around it, and the city of like Ashkelon and of course the airport itself in between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are all targeted. But yes, I mean, there is, of course, a huge disparity in the kind of power and just the broad numbers of those who've been killed and injured, and the kind of really destructive devastation that we are witnessing. And the most recent and most sort of difficult to see for someone who's been in that building so many times and works for this organization is the destruction of that building inside Gaza in the last few minutes.
What kind of impact is all this going to have? Certainly, where you are, Harry, you're inside occupied East Jerusalem. When you see these kind of images, when people who live there, be the Palestinian Israelis or be the Israeli Jews, when they see these images of either the disparity in terms of who is being affected by the violence or indeed the violence itself, how is that being felt by people within the country? And how is that manifesting?
Well, I think it's manifesting in many different ways among different communities and, of course, between individuals. But as far as Hamas is concerned, the outburst of violence in the West Bank is very much a response to what has been happening inside Gaza. I can tell you when those first rocket attacks were launched by Hamas towards Jerusalem on Monday evening, the first thing that we noticed was a big round of cheering inside the Damascus Gate steps when the sirens went off, sustained when the explosions were heard. So obviously, there's some support among at least some for the idea of those attacks. Others, there have been instances of both communities helping each other out during the aftermath of these attacks. Even as there is all this racial violence rolling through the streets. As far as Israeli Jews are concerned, there are some who are expressing exactly the same kind of concerns that we've been hearing about the nature of the destructive power, and from both the impact of it on the people of Gaza and indeed the impact of it in terms of Israel's standing in the world. There are others who say that Hamas has gone too far, that it has got away with too many of these rounds of escalations. And I was talking to one man down south where we were near the Gaza border the other day, who just gestured with his hand in a kind of a flat cutting motion, saying that the Israeli military needed to finish it. And this wasn't someone who immediately came across as some sort of rabid racist person. He was a friendly and generous-seeming person who, at the same time, felt it possible to say, just finish it, making this motion that suggested he wanted to see the entire place flattened. So it's, it is one of these very difficult to encapsulate ideas, how people feel about this. It is a very, very complicated, complex set of relationships and emotions and political positions. But you will hear different things from different people, sometimes surprising things from people that you might assume to think something else from either community as you talk to people around here.
As you do. Harry, you've been covering this region for many years now. Is it different this time? Does it feel different to you? Or is this part of the same old cycle of violence?
Well, it certainly feels different to me because I've only been here since 2017. So I have not been here during the major Gaza conflicts that we've seen in the last decade and more. I have seen a number of these escalations. I've been in Gaza as well during the border protests that we saw in 2018, 2019. But yes, it does feel different. It feels different on the scale of what is happening militarily from Israel into Gaza, and indeed the sheer volume and concentration of rockets coming out. That is a major part of this story, that there is this tactic now to really seriously threaten major urban areas with these concentrated, sustained bursts of rocket fire. And yes, the destructive power on show of what is happening from the air to Gaza. We were with tanks, Israeli tanks and artillery on Thursday night when they started that enormous barrage into northern Gaza, which saw hundreds and hundreds of people fleeing their homes and families being killed in those strikes as well. And the additional factor is this terrible round of very personal, very close quarters, racialized violence that's been erupting around the country, especially in mixed Jewish Arab towns, but more generally as well, even places that are sort of seen as places of coexistence and where people do business with each other in pretty friendly, regular terms. Even in these places, we've seen this erupt. And so I think for a lot of people living outside Gaza, inside Israel, on the Jewish side, on the Palestinian Israeli side, it feels like this is very close to home, not just in terms of the threat coming from rocket fire, but also the threat coming from potentially next door. It's very keenly felt.
OK, Harry Fawcett there joining us on the line from Sheikh Jarrah in occupied East Jerusalem. We appreciate it, Harry. Thank you very much indeed. Let's speak now to Nida Ibrahim. She is in Al-Bireh in the occupied West Bank. Nida, as I speak to you, we're showing our viewers the pictures of the Al-Jallah tower block, which housed our offices and the offices of the Associated Press, being destroyed by Israeli missile fire. If you could just start by telling me your reaction. I mean, I know we're not supposed to be the story here, but our offices have been destroyed. It makes us part of this story. So as an Al Jazeera journalist, tell me your reaction to this attack on that building in Gaza.
As you say, Hala, we try to tell the story and not be part of the story. But as Palestinian journalists, we find ourselves being targeted for telling the story. We have lots and lots of Palestinian journalists who were injured by Israeli fire and who would tell you that the Israeli army would intentionally throw tear gas canisters or bullets at the place where we are standing as journalists to prevent the story from going out on air. And I'm going to do something out of habit and talk about my personal experience when I first went to Gaza. I'm a Palestinian journalist, but I was not able to access the Gaza Strip that is besieged by Israel. But I was only able to do that in 2017. It was exactly this day, May 15th. It was the anniversary of Nakba, and it was also coinciding with a very deeply humiliating, let's say, or offensive moment for Palestinians, which is when the Trump administration moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The emotions were very high. It was my first time in the besieged Gaza Strip. I was able to see things that Palestinians here in the occupied West Bank only see on TV, although they are one people, one nation. And I remember seeing Safwat there at the protest that Palestinians were taking to the bordering line with Israel. And I've seen also Stephanie, who was reporting live from there. And I was thinking that I want to be Al Jazeera journalist. We have teams that are invested in the story. I am working now with two great crew members, our producer Rania and our cameraman Joseph, who are making sure every day that we are up to news. We are telling the story. They're very passionate people. And this is why I was longing to be Al Jazeera journalist, to be able to tell the people the stories that they don't hear on other news agencies, because sometimes the story of Palestine would be sensitive for some media organizations. So they opt out, or they just show it when it's breaking news. But here in Al Jazeera, we tell the story every day of Palestinians whose houses are being evicted. We've also covered journalists who, there's one journalist we took to whose eye was blinded by an Israeli bullet. And so oftentimes, also, we find ourselves telling stories of journalists who are covering the story. But generally, this is a place that I feel proud that I'm part of. And I feel sad to see, I just looked on my mobile phone now again and again and again, seeing the building being flattened. And it's a very sad feeling.
It is a sad feeling indeed. And I can tell our viewers that when that those images were broadcast live to us on an agency feed of our building being flattened, there were cries of distress that went out in this newsroom here in Doha. These are certainly our offices that have been destroyed, the Associated Press's offices that have been destroyed in this airstrike. But also countless Palestinian families who lived in that building will now be homeless. We don't know if anyone has been injured in that strike. It's important for our viewers to remember that Gaza is a very densely populated bit of land, very densely populated, buildings packed together, as you can see on your screens. So there is a very real chance that people could get injured, even though an hour's warning was given for that building to be evacuated. But Nida, all of this is happening on a very particular day. This day, of course, is Nakba. It's a very important anniversary for Palestinians. Just tell us more about that and what's happening where you are on this day.
There are protests that were organized in different cities in the occupied West Bank to mark this day. And there's a general strike in the West Bank also to remember Nakba, to mourn those Palestinians who were killed in the Gaza Strip and also here in the occupied West Bank after the Israeli forces shot dead 11 Palestinians on Friday. As many protesters here were telling us on Friday that Nakba is not just a memory. Nakba is still ongoing. Whatever happened to the Palestinians who had to flee their lands in 1948 and were never able to come back to it, Palestinians would tell you is the same thing that Israel is trying to do to Palestinians here, to make life so miserable for them that they have no option but to leave it. The eviction of houses in Sheikh Jarrah is just one example. The demolition of Homsa village in the Jordan Valley, which we've covered, it was destroyed completely by the Israeli army with its the families became homeless. So there are lots and lots of events and daily lives that are getting ruined by the Israeli occupation. And this is why Palestinians would tell you they want to make sure that their voice is heard. Now, many of them are taking to social media. They are saying that the narrative is changing. They're seeing lots and lots of influencers, of celebrities showing support to Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah. And they believe, those Palestinians we've been speaking to over the past week, that the narrative is changing, that they are able to reach out to more audience and tell the Palestinian story without censorship.
And that's interesting you raised that point, Nida, because a lot of there is, of course, the ongoing war, the violence and the physical attacks, but there's the war of the narrative. There's the war over who controls the narrative, which voices are being heard, who has the sympathy and solidarity of people of the wider world. Is there a feeling now that people are now starting to hear the Palestinian side of the story more in this age of social media? Or do people still feel that their concerns are not being taken seriously? There's an element of both sidesism whenever these stories are being told in the wider press.
There's a sense that Palestinian voices now have more room to being expressed on social media. However, the battle is still ongoing on this new battleground that the Palestinians are partaking in. It's very dangerous even to be posting. Sometimes we are seeing Palestinians who are posting on social media that are being detained. In one incident, one Palestinian was writing "Good morning" in Arabic, and the automatic translation mistranslated it, and the man was thought by the Israeli army that he was going to be carrying out an attack, and he was arrested. So it's a very tricky situation, specifically for Palestinians living here. They can't share everything they want to share. They can't say everything they want to say. So there is a lot of focus on Palestinians abroad to be able to carry that war of narrative, if you may, and also also celebrities, also influencers, also people who are important and who have the world's attention. In the past few years, the mention of Palestinians was kind of restricted in a way of you have to be showing support for both sides, you have to be feeling empathy for both sides. Now we're seeing more and more people venture into, no, let's wait a minute. This is an occupation. We cannot equate the occupier with the occupied, and we cannot keep talking about this story as if it's just two sides getting along together, as if it's a problem, a personal problem. This is a political issue. And many Palestinians would tell you that they feel that their voices are being heard. Now, there is this also fear of hope. There are people who are telling you that we're scared to think that things are changing and then go back to our reality under occupation where things are going to be more of the same, specifically that they are facing a very strong Israeli propaganda machine. We are seeing also Israelis in the world trying to pressure, for example, we had organizations that were like Airbnb. They decided not to enlist legal Israeli settlements in their app. But then, under pressure from Israel, they backtracked on that decision. So there is a little bit of fear of hoping that things could change because the war is still ongoing.
OK, Nida Ibrahim there, joining us from Al-Birah in the occupied West Bank, bringing us all the latest from your location, Nida, on the Nakba. Thank you very much indeed. We'll, of course, be crossing back to our correspondents. We're all across this story for you on Al Jazeera. But let's take you back now to Gaza. Joining us on the phone is Al Jazeera's Safwat Al-Kahlout. He is our designated journalist in Gaza. And earlier today, he was standing in that building, which, if you're watching this on the right of your screen, you will see the Al Jala Tower, where Al Jazeera's offices are based, where the Associated Press's offices are based, and where many families, Palestinian families, used to live. That building was blown up by missile strike just around 1 hour ago. Safwat, you have now evacuated the building. I trust you found a place of safety in Gaza. Just tell us where you are right now and what you're seeing.
Look, I have left the area. I mean, where our destroyed office. Now we are trying to apply Plan B. We are heading to get more new equipment to keep our coverage on. As you said, no silence, nobody, no one. Our mouths. We will continue the coverage. I'm heading now to get new equipment to continue the coverage despite the destruction, despite losing everything and leaving everything behind us. After the destruction, nothing to see, nothing to get out from the rubble. It's just suddenly everything is rubble. So we have no choice but to continue. And the Phoenix is waking up again and looking for new equipment. And we will be on air again with new equipment, with new cameras, new FNG, new satellite equipment. So we are now, we have secured all of my colleagues and even our colleagues in Al Jazeera Arabic. They are because they had their own additional FNG, so now they are doing live coverage from there, from the next to or in the front of our destroyed house. Now we are trying to fix our coverage and fix with a new system. I mean, crossing the fingers that we will find a new equipment fastly, because the things are really escalating in Gaza. The military wing of Hamas has just been warning from firing more intensive barrages of rockets towards Tel Aviv, specifically in response to the destruction of Al-Jalaa building, as they call it, where residential people, safe people, were staying. So the coverage should continue, and let me tell you all that we are safe. We are taking shelters. We are mobilizing and moving according to the plan of the coverage. We have Al Jazeera has always Plan B, Plan C, all the plans, but we'll never stop.
It is indeed, Safwat. We're very relieved to hear that you and all our Al Jazeera English and Al Jazeera Arabic colleagues are safe and well. It's important to remind our viewers that making television is very resource intensive. It's very resource heavy. You can't just do it on an iPhone. There's an awful lot of equipment necessary in those offices to be able to put out the programming that we do. We're grateful to you for joining us on the phone and to give us that first-hand testimony on the phone while we try and enact some kind of Plan B to be able to get live pictures and live reporting out to our global audiences. But Safwat, as someone who lives in Gaza, you work in Gaza, you live in Gaza, you are among the people, and this is not your first rodeo, shall we say. This is not the first war on Gaza that you have lived through. Just from a personal perspective, tell our viewers what it's like. What it's like being in Gaza when the territory is under attack like this.
As you said, we are used to such kind of escalation. This is not the first or second or even third time in the past 20 years since the beginning of the Intifada. We have been living under emergency circumstances. So our life is prepared in a way to expect escalation or emergency cases anytime. So as a father, as a husband, from one hand, and as a journalist on the other hand. So, of course, it's difficult for me as a father to keep all the time my children calm, especially with the huge blasts or explosions that shake my house from time to time. This is, frankly, this is the most difficult part of the whole issue, let's say. Being a father, following with your children around the clock, even day and night, texting me all the time to ask me about where is next, what has been hurt, because these explosions, although sometimes they are a bit far from your home, but it shakes your home because they are carried out by fighting jets sometimes, which really shake the whole area. So on the other hand, as a journalist, we are prepared for Plan B, as I said before, Plan B, Plan C. We have set lots of plans because we expect such escalation, such developments anytime, which has happened in 2004. Looking at this is my personal experience, but still, most of the population of Gaza, if not all, the 2 million people and more, now they all depend or live under emergency plans and emergency circumstances. The population here are unemployed. 2/3 of the population live under poverty line, and they depend on international organizations either for food or for water supplies and even for electricity. So most of Gaza, if not all, live under special circumstances based on or conditions based on emergency plans. This is how life does life look like in the Gaza Strip. Living in this place under threat all the time and expecting escalation all the time. So you don't live normal life all the time. You live with always an emergency plan in your pocket, and who has this plan is one of the luckiest, let's say, because as I told you, the majority of the population here are unemployed and depend on food aid and depend on aid organizations to survive. Now, 5 days or 6 days, people are indoors, no food supplies, the crossings are closed. Gaza is we can say now that the extra humanitarian crisis started, but still about to, because we have the only commercial crossing that supply Gaza with the food and with essential elements, including also cooking gas and fuel, is closed for the 5th and the 6th day. The sea is completely open. Fishing is banned. Now also farmers cannot reach their farm even to collect the harvest of from their farms to provide also the market in Gaza, which are running out of almost everything when it comes to vegetables and food and other essential elements. So,
okay. So it's a difficult life, Safwat.
It's all under emergency plan.
It is indeed. Well, it's good we have that emergency plan, a plan B, C or D in our back pocket. Safwat, do stay with us. We'll get you back on the line shortly. Thank you very much. That's Al Jazeera's Safwat Al-Kahlout joining us on the phone. He would have joined us from our live point on top of the roof of our building. But that building, as you will see, has just been bombed. The Al Jazeera offices, the AP offices and residential flats in the Al Jalala building have been destroyed. Al Jazeera is keeping broadcasting, though. Back with you after this.
Each and every one of us have got a responsibility to change our personal space for the better.
This is the